Welcome to History B354, The Reformation. I am Professor Eric Sack, and I'll be the instructor for this course. This course is my favorite course to teach. It's the area in which my own research and expertise lies, and so I'm excited about teaching this course again and teaching it to all of you online this summer. Uh, this first lecture is designed to kind of go through the structures of the course, what's involved, the requirements, as well as the concepts we need to keep in mind as we approach the topic of the Reformation. How are we to understand that term? How do I understand that term? And I'm not saying with this that my understanding is the only correct one, but in terms of the course, it is the perspectives that will be being presented to you that you'll need to understand and to grasp. But more on all that later as well. So we start with this course by this first lecture, looking at the requirements, which you'll need to know. I will also be sending out an announcement to all of this. The lectures will be videoed lectures like this one, and then will be posted on YouTube. I mean, recording it and then uploading it to YouTube and then posting the link in Canvas. And so and the link on Canvas for each lecture, when you click on the lecture link, you will get basically a blank page, but there's a bar at the top that if you click on that, then the lecture will come up. If you have any problems with that, just let me know. We can hopefully get that taken care of. So with that being said, I'd just like to welcome all of you here. I'm very glad you're here for whatever reasons you may be. And I hope you will take some time to introduce yourself to your fellow classmates. This is an online course, so we're not person to person, but we can still, I hope, have a sense of community to the extent that we can, and that will be with self-introductions. In the module Getting Started, I've posted an introduction to myself. There's also a discussion posted in that module Getting Started, where I ask all of you to introduce yourselves, which are basically, why are you here? What courses? Why are you taking this course? What year in school are you? Where are you from? What you might want to get out of this course, and you're welcome to share whatever else you might want to share about yourselves. So we can have some kind of a sense of what our group is really like with this. And there are weekly discussions, which I hope that will help with. And so we do the best we can. I mean, I'm not really a huge fan of online courses, if I have to say. They have their benefits, but they also have their problems. So the point to this is trying to make the best that we can with this format. I mean, there are also some problems with the in-person courses as well. So it's not that there's any particular format of offering courses that is the perfect format that works for everybody in every situation. But anyway, I'll be addressing the issue of the online nature of this course shortly. So I hope you are glad you're here, as I am, and that you'll get a lot out of this course. So that being said, we need to get started and look at how you can best get started. And with that, we go to the first slide, Getting Started, with self-introductions, which I've already mentioned, syllabus, introduction to course, and course documents. The two most important documents for the course, for getting started in any case, if not for the whole course as such, is the syllabus and then the introduction to the course. The syllabus details the schedule of lectures. It details the assignments when they're due. It sets the parameters for the course, and much of the course information that is essential for you to know is there in the syllabus. So it's something that I would strongly exhort you to read and read thoroughly and kind of review and refer to periodically. It will help you in terms of staying on track, in terms of what is expected of you, and where to go from there. The introduction to the course is a Word file. It is my attempt to explain to you how I conceive of the course, what it consists of, and I think that too is a very important document. And so with those kind of three aspects: the self-introductions, including that of myself, and the syllabus and the introduction to the course. You should be in good shape to get started on the course. A lot of the documents for this course are posted in the module course documents. That includes not the textbook, but all the other assigned readings. And there's not all that many, but there are source readings per week as listed on the syllabus. They are posted in the modules, but they're also then, I believe, posted there as well. So the course documents is the module to refer back to, which has the important documents for the course. So you can think of it as a little package I kind of have made for you and given to you that you take home. And if you need it, again, there you can open up and get to it. Okay. So that is kind of the basic part of it. And I will be posting an announcement to this effect in terms of what do you do first. I mean, the course officially begins, I believe, May 9th. So on May 9th, what do you do when you then open this course up in Canvas? It will be available before May 9th, so whenever you want to get started, you can. It probably will be available as of May 5th. Or so, or maybe even May 1st. I'll have to think about that because May 1st is the last day of official classes here at IUPUI for the spring semester. May 5th is when all the finals are due for the classes I'm teaching this semester. So before May 5th, I'm not going to be all that available for this course, but I'll do my best. But what do you do? What do you do? You should click on it. You should read the announcements that I'll also give a brief indication of how to get started and where to go from there. But this lecture is probably the first thing you should listen to, and then read the syllabus, read the introduction to the course, and then that will get you going for the next 6 weeks. Which, yes, is 6 weeks. I know it's a very intense course, and the pace moves pretty rapidly, so we'll get through it all together, I hope. That being said, then we move to the structure of the course. Now, obviously, we all know it's a summer session course, and what does that mean? As I've already kind of indicated, that it is very intensive. It's trying to squeeze a 15-week course into 6 weeks. So it's not even a double kind of a course. It's not like an intensive 8-week course, which we also have. And this semester, this spring semester, I'm teaching a second 8-week intensive Western civilization course. That we have 8 weeks to do basically a 15 or 16-week course squeezed into 8 weeks. So it's like taking 2 courses at once. Summer is even a bit more condensed. That means it takes a lot more time because the amount of work, at least theoretically, is more or less equivalent. That's practically usually not really the case. I have cut back on the assigned readings for this course for the summer session. I mean, I am teaching it as well in this spring. So by the time you're listening to this lecture, I will have completed the same course for the spring semester. And that is, again, it's an advantage for you because you have this intensive time to really focus on this course and give it all the effort you can give. So that is, it's over and done within 6 weeks in some ways. But it also means that not nearly as much can be done and covered in any course. In a semester's long course on the Reformation, we can't cover everything. That's not possible to cover everything. So it is picking out or emphasizing or highlighting based on my expertise and experience what I feel are the most important aspects for you to understand what this development is that we call the Reformation. Now there is a textbook, and I hope I hope you'll need to purchase the textbook. And the textbook readings and assignments are there on the syllabus as well. And so every week, the syllabus gives you the chapters in the textbook that you are expected to read. And it's a very good textbook. I mean, it's not a great textbook. All textbooks are not very good when it comes down to it. They all are selective, and have their own strengths and weaknesses. But this is the best textbook that I've found. And so with the textbook and the lectures, those work together with the assigned readings to comprise the course. Now, I'll say more about that, I believe, shortly. But the summer session is one aspect in terms of the structures that affect this course. And then it is this 100% online asynchronous course. Asynchronous just means that there are no set times when we meet all together online. You're welcome to do it at your own pace. There are rather firm deadlines for the 2 midterms, which I'll talk more about the midterms shortly. So you should stay on pace, and especially given that this is the intensity of this summer course and the amount of material that's covered, it's really important that you stay on track and pace yourself. So while you are kind of free to do it on your own schedule, especially in this summer setting, you probably still need to stay on course as much as possible. The firm deadlines are there for the midterms. If you have a problem meeting one of them or both of them, whatever, please let me know. I'm pretty flexible with rules and regulations. And so, there's certainly, if you have a good reason why you can't submit the midterm on the day by the time that it's due, we can make allowances for those things. Often the online courses I teach, the asynchronous online courses I teach during the semester, I basically say there are no deadlines except for the final deadline where all work must be submitted. I still stress to the students how important it is to stay on track. But I leave that to the students to determine for themselves, because I think that's one of the advantages of an asynchronous online course, is it allows the students the freedom to do it as they best they can and how they best see fit. The danger there is so often students get behind. They think, there's no set deadlines. The deadlines are simply guidelines, and so I can do it whenever. And they put it off. They have other courses that they have to deal with, as well as just often work and life in general. And they wait and wait and wait, and then they get into real trouble in terms of being able to finish the course in good fashion. With the summer course, I didn't want to say just, there are no deadlines until the final date of June 21st, or whenever it is. I'm not sure. I don't remember off the top of my head. The final date, there's no real leeway on. But for the midterms, there can be some, but try the best you can to stick to it. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a real hole. And I don't want that to happen to you. And so try to schedule your own lives and activities so that you can give to this course the time needed. I mean, in an in-person class, a summer course meets for 3 hours a day, 4 days a week. That's the intensity level of it. And that should be factored in as you're planning on getting through this course. If you have any questions about any of that, just let me know. Now, this next point up there, the slide structures for the course, is readings and lectures. The course material, as I think I've already mentioned, consists of the readings in the textbook, the lectures, and then the assigned source readings. All of those you'll need to stay on top of to complete. I mean, with the video lectures, you can stop. You don't have to sit and listen to them all at one time. You can go back and forth. And that's one of the advantages of an online course, because you can listen even to the lectures at your own pace, so to speak. Whereas in class, an in-person class, the lecture is given and it's over and done with. And so if you miss something as you're taking your notes, you can't really go back to hear it again. Whereas here, with the video lectures, you can go back and listen to it a couple of times if you want to, or certain spots of it a couple of times if you want to. And of course, you're always welcome to ask me questions for clarification or explanation as we go through. So that is the basis of the course material, those 3 components. That's why I have readings. There's actually 2 components to the readings, like readings A and readings B. The readings A is the textbook. Readings B are the assigned sources. And that will be the basis for my grading your exams and your final. is how well you apply the course material, analyze the course material, how well you understand the course material, and apply it to the given question or problems to you in the midterms and the final. I'll be talking more about the midterms as we get there. I'll be talking more about the final and what it consists of. And that those are things that you should be preparing for from the get-go, actually. And I'll say more about that very shortly. So those are the course material, the readings and the lectures, and then we have the assignments. When I said very shortly, I meant like right now. The assignments, midterms, final exam, and discussions. There are 2 midterms and the final exam. These are essay exams that you are to write and then submit in Canvas, except for the discussions are somewhat different. I've already just stated how I kind of approach grading based on the course material and how well you apply it to the problem given you, namely the question that is being asked of you. And so you will need to really analyze. This is not a course about information. There is a fair amount of information that you will need to learn and to know, or in other words, memorize, or at least have very close at hand so that you can know the pieces of information, the proverbial names and dates and things like that, that you just need to know. But this is, of course, about concepts and how do we come to an understanding of the developments of what has been referred to as the Reformation. That is the most essential aspect. And so when you see it as I'm grading not your opinions, I will not grade your opinions. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I'm not going to grade it. It'd be very easy to, because I have my own opinions, and I could grade it based on, oh, that's a good opinion because it's like mine. That's a bad opinion because I don't agree with it. That I think would be absolutely wrong and unethical of me and everything else. So I don't grade opinions. I'm not asking you for your opinions in the midterms and final. I'm asking for your analysis and your argument. That I can grade. How well have you analyzed the course material? How well do you argue your case? There is a document in course documents called historical argumentation. That too, I think, is very important, especially as you're preparing for the midterms. And that will help, I think, to explain what I'm getting at in terms of I can grade your analysis and your argument. Argument is not the same as arguing. That is somewhat of a tangential point here, but so often in our lives today and in society and our public life, that distinction is not made, and arguing is seen as argument. And so, how can we win an argument? Is simply by arguing louder and more harshly than our opponents until they finally get disgusted and shut up or whatever else. That's arguing. That's not argument. Argument is a logical structure which builds from evidence to a conclusion. That is what I can't grade. You are welcome to have a different position than the one that I present in the lectures or that Lindbergh, the author of your textbook, presents in the textbook. You will need to defend them, and you will need to show that you do understand the positions that I present in the lectures and the textbook presents. You don't have to accept them. You can disagree. That is your right. And if you take that a position that you do not agree with me, for example, that is fine. I encourage that. But on what basis do you say that? Based on the evidence that will be presented in lectures, that is presented in the course material. If you take an opposite view, how do you base your position on that? Is it based on a different interpretation? Is it based on your own analysis? And that would be fantastic. What would not be acceptable is if you go out and find other sources that disagree and then refer to those as the basis for your disagreement with the position that is presented here. Because the basis for grading, as I said, is the course material. Now, we can talk more about that. If you have questions about that, please ask. The point here is, in terms of the midterms and the final, those are graded based on your understanding, grasp, knowledge of the lectures and the textbook, and how well then you apply it to the given question on the exam. therefore keep that in mind too in terms of what's being asked. I'm not asking for what do you think about. I'm not asking you to reflect on. I'm asking you to analyze and argue. That is the point, because that is what scholars do. That is what historians do. We argue and we base our arguments on the evidence. And it all comes down to how do we interpret the evidence? How do we come to an understanding of the evidence? That's another issue. Now, when we look at the discussions are worth 10% of your grade. They are not graded on a weekly basis. You don't get the points for each discussion. In many ways, the discussion grade is your participation grade. I have very mixed feelings about discussions. I think they're very important, but people discuss in different ways. People engage in different ways. People are involved in different ways. And I have not ever come up with a satisfactory way for myself of how do I evaluate and grade discussions. Discussions are supposed to be open. I want you in the discussions to ask questions. I want you in the discussions to put forth your opinions and beliefs, because in the discussions, that is the place for opinions and beliefs. And they should not be graded. They should be examined, analyzed, looked at, but not graded and evaluated, in my view. It would be sort of like, okay, after class, if we meet in the summer, this was an in-person class, theoretically, I mean, I've never done this and I never would do it. It would probably be illegal to do it. But, after each lecture, or so if we went out to across the street to the, Chancellor's kind of sports bar and grill and, had a beer and we're talking about it, that would be the point of the discussions. Okay, so view them in that way, and if you feel best that you get the most out of it simply by kind of listening with the discussions, by reading what other students have to say, and then only making every once in a while an input with a question or a comment here, that's fine. That's fine. If you feel that you are best served by offering your own disputation on a given theme, that is fine too. The only rules for the discussions are that we are polite and we respect other positions. Which does not mean that we accept them. It's not like, oh, that's a good position too. You can disagree. You can argue in the discussions as long as it's polite, if that makes sense, and respectful. Those are the issues. Okay. So if you have any questions about those aspects, please, again, don't hesitate to ask, but that goes through the assignments. The midterms each are worth, I believe, 20% of your grade. So that's 40% of your grade from the midterm. Final exam is 50% of your grade, and discussions are 10% of your grade. And the other aspect, too, that I talk about this in the introduction of the course, the midterms are supposed to help you prepare for the final. The final is worth, half of your final grade is the final. It could also be worth more than that. Meaning, if you do better on the final than you do on the midterms, your final grade will replace your midterm grades. So, what does that mean? It means if you received, let's say, a C on the first midterm, a B on the second midterm, and an A on the final, that would translate then into 3 A's. Does that make sense? You will never receive lower. So if you received an A on the first midterm and a B on the second midterm and a C on the final, you get an A, a B, and a C, and however that would calculate out. So it works to your benefit, because the whole point for me is not to check on you to see have you the first 2 weeks, how have you been doing your work. The point of this course is what you get out of it at the end, and sometimes it takes students, people in general, a little while before kind of the light bulb goes on. Oh, now I get it. It's that experience of what you get when you leave the course that I think is the most important, and that's why the final is worth so much and why I grade it the way I do in terms of being able to replace the midterm grades. Now, again, if you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to ask. And in general, um, if ever you want to reach out with a question or a comment or just kind of to chat, please do so. Send me an email. We can chat over email, or I can schedule. I'm happy to schedule Zoom sessions. We can chat virtually, face to face, so to speak. Because I'm here to help. I'm here. That's how I view my role, is here to help you through this class and to learn the material that I think is so important for coming to an understanding of this period, and consequently too of where we are today and reflecting on ourselves. In some ways, that's what history is all about. It's not learning, details and pieces of information about the past. It is coming to terms with who we are today. So that's in some ways too what this course is all about. Anyway, that's again. Any questions? Please just ask. So moving right along then from the structure of the course to the slide: Reform, Reformation, and Revolution. 4 points there: approaching the Reformation, theology and history, defining our terms, and the historical importance of the Reformation. The Reformation is a difficult course to approach because what is it? So often, though, this is the case with all of our courses. We have these titles: the French Reformation, the French Revolution. Sorry. What's the French Revolution? What is it? The Reformation, what is it? When does it start? When did it end? What did it consist of? What is part of the Reformation? What is not? How do we understand what it is that we're actually doing and looking at and examining in this course? And that can be very difficult, especially when we have different terms. Now, if you go and read your final exam, the question there is essentially, summarizing here, and you'll need to really analyze the question when you get to answering the final, was the Reformation, or to what extent was the Reformation a revolution? Now, if we don't understand what a revolution is and what is different from revolution, Reformation, and how are revolution, Reformation distinct from reform, or are they all the same, or what difference does it make, is a problem in terms of how we are really understanding the course material. The concepts we have affect how we view things. Now, it is most likely, I'm assuming, I could be wrong on this, but I'm assuming that most of you have heard of the Reformation before you registered for this course, which means that you had some idea or concept of what it consisted of, what it was about, and what happened during the Reformation. And so often, especially in college courses, we find that what we have learned in the past is very different from what is being presented to us in college courses. And that is a problem with the discipline of history as such, and how it's taught in high schools and in middle schools and elementary schools even, that I don't really know what to do about. I'm actually finishing a book right now, final polishing stages, so to speak, book On History. It's an extended essay, kind of philosophical, based on the ontological and epistemological aspects of the past, and how we can know and say anything about the past when we for practical purposes, the past does not exist. We can't go back and look at it. We can't put it on the table and analyze it. We can't take the Reformation and put it under a microscope. But what are we looking at? We're looking at documents. We're looking at extant evidence and understanding how that extant evidence came to be. That is what really we do as history. And if anyone is really interested, I would be more than happy to send you the files of my On History. It is lengthy, it's long, it's philosophical, but just let me know and I'll be happy to do that, which kind of would go into great detail in terms of what is behind some of the things I'm saying about how our concepts affect what we actually, how we actually understand the material when we approach a course like this. And so what we've learned about the Reformation in the past, what we've been told about it, what we assume about it, from whatever sources it may be, we come in with those notions. And some of those notions may be accurate. Some of those may be defendable based on the extant evidence. Some of those may be very much in conflict with what I'll be saying. because often what gets out there, so to speak, it's influenced by so many other forces and so many other influences, and also historically, it's influenced by so much that to come to an understanding in an academic, scholarly sense can be very difficult. And that is especially the case, too, when we realize with the Reformation, we have to also deal with theology. Now, theology and history. Theology and history are two distinct terms. In short, I can say that I approach this course historically, not theologically. Except theology cannot be factored out of the Reformation. There's a big distinction, and this is one the topic for your discussion for the first week of courses. A distinction that I make between the history of theology and historical theology. Historical theology is treating historical developments theologically. The history of theology is treating the development of theological positions and ideas historically. For the historian, as historian, statements such as Jesus of Nazareth was the incarnation of the second person of the Trinity. He was crucified, died, and was buried, and descended into hell. And the third day he rose again from the dead and ascended into heaven, where he's seated at the right hand of the Father, and he will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end, world without end, blah, 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 blah. All the creedal statements, whether those statements are true or false, for the historian, as historian, is completely irrelevant. For the theologian, it's very irrelevant. It's the whole point of doing theology. Now, historians certainly have theological beliefs. But as historians, historians need to, even though they often don't, and that's why I'm writing on history too, they often don't make that distinction. But as an historian, we cannot appeal to divine causation. What's the evidence for it? And again, on history, but I would say it as much. There are very good reasons to believe that God exists. There are very good reasons to believe that God does not exist. Whichever position you accept is a belief. It cannot be proved. We cannot prove one or the other. There's a lot of evidence, good evidence, that can be used to argue for one or the other, but it cannot be proved. We cannot sit here and have God on the examining table and dissect this thing and say, oh, yes, this must be God. So I argue that both positions is a matter of belief. Both the theistic position and the atheistic position is based on a leap of faith, a belief. And that cannot be the basis for doing historical work, even if all historians have beliefs, if that makes sense. And it's been a problem with the historiography of the Reformation. And what is historiography? Historiography is the history of history writing. How has the Reformation been treated? It's been a problem for the history of the Reformation from the very beginning, from the 16th century on, because so much of the history writing about the Reformation has been historical theology, and somewhat understandably. Catholics write their side, Protestants write their side, and they conflict. It's just continuing the debate and the debates that took place and the conflicts that took place in the 16th century. In the later 1960s, a group of historians who were very much interested in the Reformation broke away from what was called at the time the American Society for Church History, which still exists, because they no longer felt that they could accept this theological approach or the historical theological approach to doing the Reformation. And they founded the 16th Century Society. And the 16th Century Society still today exists too. Basically saying, okay, theology is one thing. It's either, something that people believe. Could be everything from maybe perhaps an agnostic position to a Marxist or Freudian denial of anything that it has to do with religion. And so to do his history, we have to factor theology and religion out of it. Now, that's a viable position to take as an individual, but as an historian, it is ignoring significant aspects of the historical record, of the extant evidence. It'd be like saying, okay, I don't like this group of evidence, or this group of evidence, or this body of evidence, so I'm not going to deal with it. I'm going to ignore it because I don't like it. I think it's kooky. I'm just going to focus on this part. Fine, okay. That is not a historical approach. That is based on a philosophical or theological position itself, because I would argue, too, an atheistic position, too, is a theological position. But that's another issue. Okay. So the trick is then treating theology historically, because those statements, those theological statements, those creedal statements, whether they're true or false or not, in the absolute sense, I said, is irrelevant to the historian as historian. But what is so significant historically is that people believed that they were. So what was the basis of people's belief of some of those statements? What difference did it make? And if we can't come to an understanding of what those beliefs were, we're not going to understand the actions that were taken based on those beliefs. So we'll be talking about theology. We'll be talking about late medieval theology. We'll be talking about Luther's theology. We'll be talking about Calvin's theology. As I kind of said before, this is in some ways, especially in the summer, a course that necessarily kind of picks and chooses the highlights. This is not certainly a comprehensive treatment of the Reformation. I'll be talking a bit about Luther and Calvin. I won't be talking much at all. I may not even mention Oecolampadius or some of the other reformers. Martin Butzer will probably pop up in a lecture here or there. But it's an issue of the theology is irreducible to understanding the history, even though it's not based on a theological perspective, and I'm not making a theological evaluation of the validity of one position or the other. If you have any questions about this, please ask, because this is essential for your grasp of what it is that we're doing in this course, what I'm trying to do in this course, and how it's being approached and what the expectations are. Statements, confessional statements, are not historical statements when they're made by historians. They're historical statements when they're made, and then historians can look at those confessional statements to ask, how is that possible? Why did they believe those things? Why, for example, did Andreas Bodenstein from Karlstadt believe that, in the words of institution, Jesus said, "This is my body"? He was pointing to himself. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the Eucharistic problems and issues. Why is that? How could the Catholics come to a position that was codified then in 1215 at the Third Lateran Council that the transubstantiation defines what happens in the Eucharist, whereby the wine and the bread become the actual physical body and blood of Christ? How could it be that Luther accepted that too, even though he denied transubstantiation, but then he advocated for consubstantiation? How can we argue then that Calvin, or how can Calvin argue that it's not really a physical thing, but it's a spiritual thing, even though it's still the real body and blood of Christ, but it's the real body and blood of Christ up in heaven? It's all these different things that we can have to ask. How did these positions come about? Why did they believe what they believed, and what difference did it make? And in that context, if we can't understand the Eucharistic theology and the debates and conflicts of the 16th century, we won't understand the civil wars within the empire. Period. Because there was so much going on about that. But we'll get there when we get there. That's the point I want to make in terms of theology and history. that we need to keep the focus on doing history, even when we're looking at the history of theology. And we need to avoid any type of historical theology, which is making theological pronouncements and claims as a basis for understanding what has happened. I certainly have my own theological beliefs. I'm assuming all of you do too. Whether those entire specter of possible positions. And since I have just said too that for me, an atheistic belief is a theological position to take, so it kind of includes everything. If and I'm not meaning or intending to undermine anyone's beliefs, but rather to say, evaluate what are your beliefs based on. How can I come to a different understanding or deeper understanding or a more convinced understanding of my personal beliefs by being confronted with the challenges of, is that really the case? So in some ways, I want to help you evaluate your beliefs, question your beliefs, not to undermine them, but potentially to strengthen them. Whether that is, that I'm a Muslim, and I think that Christianity has been, the work of the devil throughout history. Okay, fine. Let's analyze that. How did that idea come about? What were the influences on that development that led to you having that position? Now, so whatever, or I'm Jewish, and why what isn't how can Christians really believe that this prophet? Okay, he's a good prophet, had some interesting things to say and some important things to say, but he's not God. How do we handle these various different positions? Or even, again, there is no God. Religion is all a bunch of hooey. Analyze it. Why do you think that? What is it based on? There's been a lot of undefendable theological and or religious positions put out there. That is easily taken care of, but not as such. We can easily, argue. Well, I'm not going to go into that now, but there are beliefs that cannot be defended. But some of the fundamental issues, you can't be. They can't be definitively proved because there is no evidence for it. So the question again then is analysis, struggle, understanding, and trying to come to a new understanding. And that is what I hope this course will offer you, a new understanding of your own beliefs and positions, as well as the developments that happened hundreds of years ago, and how those developments have impacted your beliefs today. Because history, as I so often say, is not a thing of the past. It's a thing of the present. It's coming to an understanding of who we are and how we got to be here. And that's true, too, for the Reformation. Now, that is kind of a bit more extensive treatment of theology and religion than I had planned. But again, I hope you will think about this in terms of your own approach to the material in the course. And if you read something and say, well, that's not right, why do you feel that way? What's that based on? And if you think it might not be right, whoever wrote it, or even if it was with me, if I'm lecturing on it, how and why did they say that? On what basis did they think it was right? Because in my lectures, I'm not going to be telling you things that I think are wrong. I'm not going to be saying, ho, 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 I'm going to see if I can trick you. I'm not going to be doing that. And so I believe I can defend what I'll be saying in my lectures. And if you hear those and say, wait a minute, that's not right. Why? Ask yourself, why am I saying that? How could I come to the position that I would believe that is right, or feel that that is right, or assert that that is right when you think it's wrong? How can we come to a better understanding, a more sophisticated understanding, a more analytical understanding of the positions we have? That is the point. So again, I'm not trying to change anybody's beliefs. I'm not trying to undermine anybody's beliefs. I'm trying to allow you the opportunity to evaluate and analyze your own beliefs, perhaps too, to strengthen them and give them a firmer basis within an academic context. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now that is all part of talking about theology and history. Now, the third point on this slide, defining our terms. And that will be very important throughout this course. What do we mean when we throw around terms? What do we mean when we talk about Reformation? What does Reformation signify? I'll be talking a lot more about that as we go along. How are we going to understand that? Now, one of the basic distinctions of the Reformation, quote unquote Reformation, that I uphold and argue, is that we need to distinguish at least three general developments of the Reformation. The first is the Reformation of the later Middle Ages, which we say goes from approximately 1300 to approximately 1530. And then we have Luther's Reformation, which goes from approximately 1520 until 1545. And then we have the what I call here the various patterns of Reformation, or then we could also talk about the age of confessionalization, which goes from 1530 to, you can take it up to 1789 if you want, but certainly to the end of this course. What are the distinctions between those? And just with the dates right there, they overlap to a degree. So how do we distinguish one from the other? How do we distinguish the Reformation of the later Middle Ages from Luther's Reformation? Especially when Luther begins, as I will be arguing, as very much a product of the Reformation of the later Middle Ages. There's this transition and change. He becomes something else. When, why, and how? Anyway, those are the definitions. And if we refer to the Reformation as a revolution, as scholars have, and here I'm not even saying that I would claim it's a revolution, but scholars have put that out there. What do we mean by it? How so? Because the term revolution has different connotations than does Reformation. And we'll get at the Shakespeare's statement, a rose by any other name would still smell as sweet. That's very true historically for historians, and we need to keep that in mind, because what we're doing is we're talking about terms and concepts and not about the actual developments as signified by the evidence that still exists. How do you define your terms? So some of this course, some of the parts of the examinations, the midterms, the final, are essentially asking you, or will be asking you, to define the terms that we use to describe what we observe. And on what basis do we do so? That is a very important part of this course, defining our terms, making distinctions, to find out what really is new. Because if we don't do that, we are very liable to simply say, oh, here's something new, and this is what Reformation is. We see it here, 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 and here, when that's not really what those developments were or events were at all. What is new and what is not new. And one traditional one is Luther's stance at Worms. And if you don't know what I'm talking about here, you will when we get there, so you don't have to worry about it. But when he says, his famous, I will not and cannot recant unless I can be, convinced by Scripture, it would be a sin to go against my conscience. Therefore, I will not and cannot recant. God help me. Amen. A later addition to that was, here I stand. God help me. Amen. That here I stand was a later addition. It was not part of what Luther actually said. Number one. Number two, that has been seen, Luther's stance at Worms, with or without the here I stand, has been seen as Luther appealing to individual conscience, standing up against the authority of the Catholic Church. That's all bogus. Luther was appealing to a very traditional, long-term, long-standing medieval psychological position, meaning that it's a sin to go against your conscience. That was a medieval psychological position. Psychology here being like on the soul, the psyche in Greek. And in the moral theology of medieval Christendom, which I'll be talking a little bit about next lecture, and so even if you're wrong, even if you were wrong, it'd be a sin to go against your conscience, because your conscience is that little spark of divinity that has us, that tells us what's right and wrong. Now that can be wrong, but to go against it is to deny it, and that would be a even worse sin. So Luther's appeal to his conscience was not something new; it was something very traditional that everybody there knew implicitly and said, "Oh yeah, you're right. Okay, well, sorry, Martin. At least you didn't, compound it by just going along with what we're saying." That's what I mean by defining our terms and trying to see what is new and what isn't, what is a new departure, what is just simply a development from previously existing issues and critiques, because again, the critiques of the church have been there all along. We'll talk about that again as we go along. So be careful and analyze the terms that you use. When you're writing your exams, when you're listening to the lectures, ask me, say, what does he mean by that term? And when you're reading the textbook and when you're reading the treatises or the documents that you'll be are required to read for each week. That is very important, defining our terms. Now, however we approach the Reformation, whatever we call it, or however we describe it, I would argue and claim that the Reformation, as, let's say, a general period of European history extending from approximately 1300 to approximately 1600, had huge significance. Europe in 1300, I do not know of a medievalist or early modernist who would argue that Europe in 1300 was modern or early modern. It's medieval. But by 1600, it's early modern. It's fundamentally changed. But what has changed? How did it change? How did that change come about? And whatever it is that we refer to as the Reformation, what role did that play in this rather significant change in the development of European society and politics and religion? It's a question, and there's no right or wrong answer. There are good answers and there are bad answers, and that applies to your exams too. There are no right answers or wrong answers. You can get things right or wrong, but it's coming to an understanding based on what the evidence indicates. And how do we understand and interpret this evidence? It's not based on what I think in my head. It's not based on what someone else thinks in their head. It's based on what the evidence indicates or signifies. That's the only basis we have for constructing arguments for what happened between 1300 and 1600. We cannot factor out the Reformation because it deals with theology. Does it deal with theology? And that will be one of the questions too that you'll be dealing with in discussions and implicitly, if not explicitly, in the assignments. Is it primarily a theological development, or was it primarily a political development, or a social development, or was it all together? How do we understand all those different factors or aspects of society working together? Was it a revolution? Well, in one way it was. In what way was it? In other ways it was not. In what ways was it not? History is complex and messy. It's not straightforward. It's not reducible to manageable formulas. Is a mess. And it's into that mess that I am inviting you to come with me to experience and to see and to make it even messier than you ever thought it possibly could be. That's the excitement and fun of history. But in the broader sense, we say, okay, again, if we want to understand European history, Can we do so without understanding the Reformation? I would say no, not really. That's one of the problems with history. You can always trace it back. Can we understand the Reformation without understanding the Middle Ages? I say absolutely not. Can we understand the Middle Ages without understanding ancient Rome? I say absolutely not. And on back we can go until we get to some beginning point, either creation or the Big Bang. But it doesn't help much to say, so what happened between 1300 and 1600? Why did it take place? Because of the Big Bang, or because of God created in the beginning. God created the heavens and the earth. You can't really appeal to that and have it very satisfying for understanding a particular, even if in some ultimate sense it's true. So how do we go about it? What do we do? How do we deal with the complexity? How do we deal with the messiness? Not to try to clean it up, not to make it, manageable, but to come to an understanding of it and its impact. We'll be talking a lot more about this as we go along. But in terms of European history and whether or not that is relevant or important or significant for our world today, and I would argue that it certainly is, the Reformation, however defined, had a central role to play therein. That, too, is what this course is about. That being said, we can now move on to keys to success, because this kind of introduction have introduced you to things already that we will be coming back to during the course, during the lectures, as well as some points will be then elaborated on more extensively, and on we will go. But the key and the goal to this course is actually your final exam. How do we come to an understanding of the Reformation? What does the Reformation signify? What's included, what's not? And was it a revolution or not? That is kind of what it's all about getting at. And to do that, you'll need to keep up, and you'll need to do the work. Again, I said before, this is not about your opinions. So this is not simply saying, well, I know how it all happened, so I'm going to just write my own opinions and whatever. That's not what this is about. It is looking at the evidence, the course material, and how we get through this all in 6 weeks. Now, I said the first key to success out of the 2, 4, 6, 7 there or so is engagement and involvement. Especially in the summer's course that is intense, you need to be engaged. You need to be involved. If you accept this kind of passively, saying, yeah, I got to do this, you're not going to do well. I can't imagine that would be possible. So you need to think of, how can I be engaged? How can I actively be engaged? You can be actively engaged by trying to really listen to the lectures and grasp what the lectures are about. Read the textbook, absorb it, ask questions of it, participate in discussions, however best you participate, to think about what your classmates are saying and their views and opinions, posing your own questions. And the more involved you are, the more engaged you are, I think the better chance that you will do very well in this course will be. Time management is also, as I've already mentioned, a central aspect, because especially in a summer course, especially in an intensive summer course, if you don't manage your own time to which you have to give to the course, to prepare for the course, to be involved and engaged, you're not going to do well. So think about that consciously. How can I schedule my days, my weeks for the next 6 weeks so I can give sufficient time to this course? And just as I said, it's in a face-to-face course, in-person course in the summer. It's 4 days a week, 3 hours a day. A general rule of thumb used to be, and I'm not sure if it still is or not, but you can just think of it in these terms, that for every hour in class, you should spend 2 hours outside of class studying and preparing. So if we say, okay, 3 times 4 is 12, that's 12 hours a week for the summer. And then times 2 is 24. So that's 12 and 24 is 36 hours a week. That's what it will take to get through this course in 6 weeks. 36 hours a week. That may not take you that. If you can do it in 20, great. If it might take you 60, if you want to do well, that's what you got to do. That's just an indication of the amount of time that we're talking about here. If you have issues with this or questions about this or concerns about this, send me an email. Let's talk about it. I just want to emphasize key to your success is very much how much time and effort you're able to put into the course, and especially in the summer's course, which is very intensive and extensive for a very limited period of time. So manage your time. Reaching out, asking for help. Anytime you have a problem, an issue, a question, a concern, send me an email. Post in discussions your questions. See if your classmates can help out. Send me an email. We can talk about it. We can chat about it again over email or via Zoom. Anytime you find yourself having problems, reach out. Problems are better dealt with and far more easily dealt with beforehand than afterwards. So if you find yourself struggling, if you find yourself getting behind, reach out. Ask me. So, I'm beginning to really have a problem here. What can we do about it? Okay? That is what I mean in terms of doing well. You need to stay on top of it and actively take the responsibility for your own learning and your own performance, which is what this is all about. It's about you taking responsibility for your own learning, for your own education, for your own performance. I will help in whatever way I can. But if you need help, you need to reach out to me. Okay? I'm not going to be sitting here looking over your shoulder saying, oh gosh, Bobby hasn't, really, signed in to Canvas recently. What's going on? Oh, Bobby, what's going on? I'm not going to be doing that. Okay. That's up to you. If you're having problems, reach out to me. I'll, again, do anything I can to help. But the onus is on you. The responsibility is on you because this is your course. Make this course your course and make it work for you. That is the reaching out and asking for help, whether that is, I didn't really understand what you were saying. Let's go on. Now, very much connected with that is question everything. Question everything. There is passive reading or passive listening, and there's active listening. And one of the central points of difference is active listening is questioning as you're listening. Really? Really? Why are you saying that? Active reading is questioning. Really? Why are they writing that? What are they thinking of? What's behind that? When you write your exams, I'm going to be questioning. I'm going to say, how do you know? What's that based on? What's the basis for your assertion and your position? Ask questions. Questioning is, Aristotle said humans by nature are the animals that desire to know. I said, humans by nature are the animals that desire to understand, to come to an understanding, making a distinction between knowledge and understanding, but that's another issue. And so that the flip side of that is humans are animals that are ignorant, that don't know. And the thing is, the more we learn, the more we don't know. And there's nothing wrong with being ignorant. Everybody's ignorant, just of different things. Questioning helps us come to face with our ignorance and therefore with developing higher levels and degrees of knowledge and understanding, which then correlate to higher degrees of ignorance. You may have heard the phrase, I don't even know what I don't know. That's kind of a nice state to be in. There's so much in the world out there and in the past and of history and of contemporary society that I know I don't know anything about it, so I even know that I don't know that I don't know. And that's fine. In my own area of specialty, in my own research, I'm very key aware of what I don't know. And it keeps me up at night because I can't know everything. No person can. I know a lot about what I do. Generally considered the world's expert on the late medieval Augustinian tradition. But still, I say, gosh, I don't know it. Because the more I learn about it, the more I realize how little I do know. Taking a course is about that. Is learning more, but yet being confronted with how much we still don't know. Now, that is related then to questioning. Questioning is the pursuit of seeking answers. And that then is too tied in with your special interest. There may be parts of this course that you don't really find all that thrilling or interesting. Let's find that would be natural. No one's saying that you have to find everything I say that comes out of my mouth and everything that you read to be just exhilaratingly exciting. But if you find all of it boring, question, why are you finding it boring? What do I find boring about it? Let me ask myself that. Is there something that I think is kind of interesting? Is there something that I, heard Professor Sack say in lectures, that I read in either the documents, the source documents, or in the textbook that suddenly I thought, hey, that's kind of interesting. Find your interest and pursue it, and pursue that line through. Because your interest will help you get through the course. If you don't have an interest in some aspect of a course, it's just going to be drudge work. I hope this course will not be drudge work for you. Is there drudge work in it? Yeah, you have to listen to the lectures. You have to do the reading. There's a fair amount of reading. And you have to write the exams. That's drudgery. What gets you through it? Excitement. And what's excitement based on? Your special interest, whatever it might be. So find your special interest and allow that to help you get through the drudgery of the course of this intensive summer online course. And I think you'll end up finding that is a huge help. It's almost going back to Mary Poppins. In every job that must be done, there's an element of fun. You find the fun and snap, the job's a game. Make the course your game. Find the fun for you. The keys to the success then too, once you've done that, is relating general statements and comments to particulars, which is kind of the inverse of analyzing the evidence. The particulars are the details of what happened, the details of the documents that you'll be reading, the details that they'll be presenting you in a lecture, and then how does that relate to the overall whole? So you should always be asking yourself, if we're looking at something very specific and detailed, that's important. How does that relate to the overall picture? How does the overall picture relate to the details? Because that is really what your exams will be getting at. Your exams are asking you for the overall picture, both the midterms and the final. Overall picture, but you have to relate it to the detail and the specifics. See how those interact throughout the course from the very beginning, and I think that will help as you go through it. And then finally, challenge yourself. Ask yourself questions. When I say question all the material, also question yourself. And by questioning, that means we challenge ourselves. Can I do more? Why do I think what I think? Why do I believe what I believe? Can I do an even better job on this? That's a challenge. Challenge yourself to put your best foot forward and do your best work. That will help as well. The exams, when you submit them, make sure that they represent you. They do. So how are you wanting to be represented? How do you want to represent yourself when you submit your midterm exams and your final? How do you want to present yourself in the discussions? Most importantly, in the midterms and final. Because they represent you. Challenge yourself. Find your special interest. Be willing to confront your ignorance and confront the messiness that is not only just simply the Reformation, but that is history as such. Challenge yourself. That's what growing means. That's the growing process, the learning process. I've often said if we don't ever learn to do anything that is difficult and hard, we'll never do anything. We'd still be, infants rolling around on the floor, because learning to walk is very difficult. I, don't remember myself, but I do remember watching my two boys learn to walk. And they fall down, and they cry. They get up, they fall down, they cry. It hurts. Not really nice. Anything we do that allows us to grow is difficult. This course is difficult. I don't make any apologies for that. So challenge yourself to rise up and meet the difficulty of this course, the difficulty of the Reformation, of history, of life. Challenge yourself. It's going to be exciting and exhilarating. That too is something I hope you will get out of this course. And the last thing I'll say in this lecture is reach out. Send me emails. Let's talk about things. Again, any problems, send me an email, and we can talk about them. I'm here to help. I hope you'll take that seriously because I sincerely view it that way. And I hope that you'll see if you do reach out that that is backed up by my willingness to do so. Anyway, thank you for listening. And we'll go from here in the next lecture. Week 1, Lecture 2 is on medieval Christendom. Because before we can talk about what is reformed or what the Reformation was about, we need to look at what came before. So there are, in some ways, the next lecture, which may be in 2 parts or so, we'll see, is putting together a course on the Middle Ages into 1 lecture. But we need to have some of the basic structures to see what is different and distinctive, just like I mentioned earlier in terms of Luther's appeal to his conscience as being a medieval concept. What were some of the other medieval concepts that might seem new, might have been treated as new and argued as having been new, that were very much not new, very much traditional medieval teaching, understanding, conceptions. That's what we'll be dealing with in the next lecture, and then going from there. Your first midterm is due in 2 weeks. So strap yourselves in, let yourself go, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.